Well, we begin with a conversation we had a couple of hours ago with AU chairperson Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Madam Chair, in your opening remarks this morning, you lamented the fact that in the past, in the past year, there have been 10 elections on the continent, and they don't seem to have built upon what was already there in terms of empowering women.
Well, of course, there are many countries that are doing well in empowering women, but it can never be enough. And there are those who are slower, so we are all developing at different paces. But of course, nobody ever thought that the empowerment of women will happen overnight or just in 1 year. It's a process as long as we keep going forward. And we must try and accelerate it as much as we can. But yes, it's true that some countries are slower than others.
So you don't think it's a question of maybe people feeling, well, we've done enough, and maybe we don't need to push any harder?
Well, I don't think they can say they've done enough, because it's clear that whether you take what was agreed in the UN or what has been agreed here, they haven't done enough. But what is more important is not really people thinking they are doing women a favor. It's not a favor. It is a prerequisite for transformation. And so countries that do not pay attention to the empowerment of women will actually never reach their full potential. And they will regret, because if you exclude other people, you're excluding talent, you're excluding energy, creativity. But also it's women's rights. It's their right to participate in all areas of human endeavor.
Now, another issue you obviously feel very strongly about, certainly from the speeches you made, but also a point you touched on today, was the silencing of guns. Given what is happening in South Sudan, in Somalia, in Burundi, in Libya, do you think the heads of state, when they gather here over the next few days, will be able to take some really tough resolutions which will ensure that guns are silenced in those parts of the continent?
Well, they took this decision in 2013 that they want to silence the guns by 2020. So it's important that they therefore take measures that will silence the guns. But if we see the conflicts that we have today, most of them are internal. We are not seeing any conflict in Africa where one country is fighting another. The problems are internal. And of course, there are issues around extremism and terrorism. So we need to look at the root causes of these conflicts and address them. Because if you think you can have peace and security only by deploying soldiers, is not enough, because to sustain peace and to have peace, you must also have development. Development is a prerequisite for peace, because people who are hungry, people who are homeless, one day they'll rise. And so it's important to look at the two and make sure that they go hand in hand.
Is it about that in South Sudan, for example?
Well, South Sudan is a very young country.
What do you think is the problem there?
If you look at it, first, there were no strong political institutions. Secondly, there were no strong government institutions. A dispute that was taking place within a party degenerated into war. But also, it's about resources as well, the control of resources. So, and also, it's about children going to school, it's about health services, it's about infrastructure, it's about all those things. But of course, if everybody feels that they are included and that the resources of the country are being used for the benefit of the people, then people will be more tolerant. So I think it's important, but South Sudan, the institutions are very important. Even now, they still need to build strong institutions, because there'll always be disagreements. There'll always be shocks in a country, but you need institutions that can absorb those shocks, that can deal with those disagreements without those disagreements degenerating into war.
Do you think we're anywhere near finding a solution to the South Sudan problems, with all the accompanying tragedies of like gang rapes, of like sexual slaves? Are we anywhere near resolving that question?
Well, I think it was important to reach some agreement. We are now hoping that the opposition, the SPLM in opposition, will come back to Juba. I'm told that the advance team has arrived, but the leadership must also arrive there. Because without a government, an inclusive government, it would be difficult to deal with all those things. You need a government that represents all the people. And of course, then they need to deal with those issues. But not only the government, society, faith-based leaders, traditional leaders, leaders of civil society must all deal with these problems. But that is the problem. Once there is war, then all the crimes that happen in communities but are then dealt with by law and order. When there is war, there is no law and order. So those things just happen in extreme circumstances. Because there is rape in society, but when there is war, it just becomes exaggerated. And so it's very important to get back to a government that can exercise law and order, communities that can look at their own laws in communities and their own leadership and their own activities.
What about Burundi? Are we on top of that situation?
Well, it's on the agenda of the heads of state. We'll see what they say.
But what is your reading of what could be the root causes of the situation we're seeing there?
Well, again, if you look at Burundi, this conflict is not new. It was resolved 10 years ago. There seemed to be a semblance of peace for 10 years, but clearly the fault lines that were there were not completely addressed. And as soon as there is a disagreement, you can see those fault lines widening. So it started with disagreements about whether there should be a third term or not. And then it's deteriorated into a conflict that is now claiming lives on a daily basis. But also the violence is coming from both sides, from some groups and from government. So that was why the peace and security thought that there needs to be a stabilizing force that can assist both sides to stabilize the security situation there and protect the installations, the civilians, disarm those armed groups where they are found to be armed, and make sure that there are border patrols, because there are also claims that there are attacks that are coming across the border. So that stabilizing force can assist in doing all that together with the Burundians themselves.
Well, the Burundi government seems to be rejecting the idea out of hand.
Well, we'll see. There's a meeting of heads of state. We'll see what they say, and we'll see what Burundi says. But obviously, it's clear that they need assistance.
Lastly, Madam Chair, the African Union becoming self-reliant and being able to fund its own programs, being able to really do what it wants to do without feeling the pressure of some outside funder or donor. Are we anywhere near achieving that goal?
Well, that goal is not a goal that can be achieved overnight, but I think we have moved from where we were, in the sense that before it was accepted that the member states will pay for operational, donors will pay for programs and peace and security. But it is now accepted that we must move away from that, that we must begin to put money gradually into peace and security and fund at least 25% of the operations over time.
So the targets have been revised?
Yes, because, I mean, peace and security is the primary responsibility of the Security Council. So that's why it's 25% rather than 100%, because the primary responsibility lies elsewhere. And we contribute to the United Nations. It's not that member states don't contribute there. Secondly, it has also been agreed that 75% of programs must be paid by member states, and that must come in gradually. And that's why there is a discussion about, if countries cannot get that from the fiscus, what are the alternate ways through which they can raise those resources? So I would say yes, we've moved, because before it was just a matter of fact that that's how it is. But the fact that heads of state have said, they've deliberated, the ministers of finance have said, and they are the ones who came with these revised targets. So yes, there's movement, but it's not something that can be solved overnight, but there's movement.
Madam Chair, best of luck and happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Thank you.